going on? It's Ethan with Rewind Sports, and I had to take a couple of days to let it really marinate what just happened to the Utah Jazz. And I know that I haven't made a video that wasn't a podcast in a while, but I felt like this scenario deserved one. Because it is storied and it takes place over years and years of building the franchise. And this season, it all came crashing down. The regular season was a disappointment, to say the least. And then the playoffs was an utter fail for the Utah Jazz on so many fronts. So what I'm going to do today is tell you what went wrong and what the Jazz need to do to fix it. And spoiler alert, the Jazz team that you saw this year will not be the Jazz team you see next year if the front office in Utah has any sense of what they're doing at running a basketball franchise. I tend to think they do, especially with Danny Ainge being the general manager now. I'd like to think that we'll see some improvements, maybe not in wins, but in building this team for the future. But who knows? Because how badly this team failed this year leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I'm hoping that that same taste is in the mouths of every person sitting in the front office in Salt Lake City, and that they will get up and do something about it. But what went wrong? Well, you could start before this season about just how badly this team was built. You have a guy in Rudy Gobert who is a Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, an All-NBA player 4 times, and countless all-defensive teams, 3-time All-Star, probably the best defender in the league most of the time. And they thought to themselves, this guy is so good at what he does that we do not need to put a single other player in the main core of this roster that can play defense. Now, it's not completely their fault. A guy like Donovan Mitchell came into the draft projected to be one of the better defenders in his draft. It's turned out he's a very bad defender. No real excuse for it. He has the build for it, a crazy wingspan for his height. He's short, he's stout. For his position, Donovan Mitchell, you would expect the only thing that he's missing is hustle, energy. To be a great defender, you see that hustle, you see that energy on the offensive side. You don't see it on the defensive side. It's all mental for him. But for the most part, other than that, it's guys who are just incapable of playing defense. You have Mike Conley, who the Grizzlies shafted the Jazz out of in a trade to get him. The Jazz got screwed. At the time, it didn't look like we did, but in hindsight, Mike Conley hasn't done anything for this team to write home about. He's too small and he's too old. Can't play perimeter defense. Bojan Bogdanovic is too slow. Sometimes he looks okay out there, but most of the time he's getting cooked by stronger wings. Royce O'Neal is probably our perimeter defensive guy on the team. That's not good. He is a good defender, but he's not a great defender, and he's not a defender who can lock up a top 10 player on the other team. And in this series, when he couldn't even lock up a guy like Jalen Brunson, who was sitting the bench for most of the season, coming off the bench. So you look at it, you got one guy, Rudy Gobert, who's a fantastic interior defender, defends the rim like no other player in the league, who is not half bad at defending the perimeter for his size and skill level in that department. Not half bad at that for a center of his build. So for the most part, Rudy Gobert is doing what he needs to do. But then you have a perimeter defense that is so incapable of doing their job that it puts so much extra pressure on a guy like Rudy Gobert in the paint that it totally screws the team's entire defensive look up, right? So you have a guy with the ball on the other team that drives past your defender every single time. For the majority of this season, for the majority of this series against the Mavericks, it was Jalen Brunson. Sometimes it was Luka Doncic. Sometimes it was Spencer Dinwiddie. Sometimes it was Maxi Kleber. You know what I mean? They drive straight past your perimeter defender you have on them. They go straight for an easy layup, so that's the easiest shot in basketball. That's 2 points, 1-2. Doesn't get any easier than a layup. Maybe a dunk, but some would argue dunks are riskier than layups. Doesn't get much easier than a layup. So Rudy Gobert, the best rim protecting big man in the league, comes in to do his job to protect the rim from the easiest shot in basketball. He does that. Very rarely do they take it into him. Very rarely do they try to get him off his feet, because he's good. He's really good at what he does. You know what I mean? And so what they do, they kick it out. Well, you would hope that your perimeter defense is competent enough to rotate to defend the guy that Gobert just left. No. The Jazz lost several games because the guy that the ball handler kicks it out to gets wide open threes. Boom, 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 boom. If you remember, Terrence Mann did the same thing last year. That got blamed on Rudy Gobert. Look, it's not Rudy Gobert's fault. Did he have his greatest series of all time? No. But was it his fault that this was happening? No. It was A, the perimeter defenders' faults because they're so bad at 50% of their job. And it was B, Quinn Snyder's fault, the head coach, for allowing it to happen. So the only guy that's excusable in this series on the defensive end for me, Rudy Gobert. However, he's very much not excusable on the offensive end. If you're 7'1" and you have an incredibly long wingspan, very athletic, and you get the ball in the paint against a dude who's 6'6", 6'7", and you can't score when you're 2 feet away from the basket, you have serious issues, dude. Serious issues. I know we rely on him for defense, but as much as we rely on him for defense, we need to rely on him for offense, just like we expect these guys that we rely on for offense to help us out on defense. He's so bad at offense that it hurts, right? He's a 14, 15 points per game scorer throughout the regular season. It doesn't seem like he's the worst in the world. You put him in a playoff series when he has to actually make plays every once in a while as far as getting the ball in the paint and making a move to score against a guy half his size, he just can't do it. He's incapable for some reason to do it. He needs to get a new offensive coach, a personal trainer, something. He's so bad. As far as the role players, right? Bogdanovich didn't have a great series. Mike Conley didn't have a great series. Royce O'Neal didn't have a great series. Daniel House coming off the bench had a decent series, not great. Who else? Jordan Clarkson was pretty good this series, surprisingly, because he was not very good this regular season. Any other people, guys here and there. Hassan Whiteside doesn't need to be on this team next year. He's old and he's a has-been, and he tried. He does look like he's trying out there when he's out there, but he just can't keep up. And so that brings me to the Donovan Mitchell experience. So Donovan Mitchell can't be the number one option on a championship team. 2 years ago, you asked me that. I was like, yeah, he'll develop into a guy that can be the number one option on a championship team. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. He's actually digressed over the last 3 or 4 years, which is incredible. His 2020, and I know it was in the bubble, right? He had an incredible playoff series against the Nuggets in the bubble, to the point where you were like, a little bit of this is probably bubble fluke, but not all of it, right? You still have to be really good at basketball to do what he was doing. And I was like, give him 2 years, and he can definitely be the first option on a championship team. He averaged 26 points in this playoff series when we needed him most to score, right? He's our number one option. We needed him more than anybody on offense, and he averaged 26 points. In the past, he's averaged 30, almost 40. Him getting worse on the offensive end in the playoffs against a team whose primary defender on him was Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie. It's unacceptable, right? Dorian Finney-Smith is the only defender on him that you could make an excuse for saying, well, that's a really good defender. He's not going to get as many buckets against him. But still, a guy as supposedly transcendent as Donovan Mitchell, you got to score against him. You just got to do it. You got to go out there and get your points. He just wasn't great this series. And I think that's a good segue into what the Jazz need to do moving forward. So they just sucked this series. They sucked this season. They had a very good chance to be the second seed in the West this year, and they fell all the way to fifth and got screwed over by not screwed over. They got beat the crap out of by a team who was missing their best player and whose backup point guard absolutely was the best player in the series. Best player in the series. Jalen Brunson was the best player in the series. Donovan Mitchell got outclassed by a guy who came off the bench for the majority of the season. That should tell you that he cannot be the number one option on a championship team, and he can't play defense. So, but moving forward, what do the Jazz need to do? It's pretty simple. They got to blow it up. I know you've heard it everywhere. They got to blow it up. They got to blow it up. I'm seeing on Twitter Jazz fans saying they shouldn't blow it up. This is Utah. We're not getting free agents. We got to make our way through the draft. Look, if you don't want to blow it up, that's fine. If you want to remain mediocre, if you want the Jazz to remain mediocre, ceiling Western Conference Finals, but probably ceiling second round, that's fine. The Jazz are the most mediocre team in NBA history. They have one of the highest winning. They have a top 5 winning percentage over the last 5 years, and the farthest they've made it is the second round. Second round. So if you want to remain mediocre, never win a championship, never even have hopes of winning a championship, that's fine. If you want to make it to the playoffs every year and get your butt kicked in the playoffs, but enjoy not being horrible in the regular season for a couple of years, that's fine. I don't agree with that. I think we need to go into a rebuild. We got nothing to lose. We're not contenders. What do we have to lose to go into a rebuild right now? To totally just go into a full-on rebuild right now. We have nothing to lose. We don't have anything to gain from remaining in the current state that we're in of mediocrity. We just don't. So, what do? You pretty much clear out the roster. Trades. Bojan Bogdanovic, gone. Mike Conley, gone. Royce O'Neal, gone. Jordan Clarkson, gone. Who else? Hassan Whiteside, gone. Rudy Gay, gone. Nikhil Alexander-Walker, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, throw him in a trade package, gone. Legitimately only guys that I wouldn't mind seeing on this team next year are Eric Paschall, Jared Butler, and one of Rudy Gobert or Donovan Mitchell. And that brings me to my next point. We got to get rid of one of them. I think either of them can be a star on your team, but neither of them can be your number one guy. You got to get rid of them, right? You can have Rudy Gobert and build a very, very good defensive team if that's what you want to do, and focus on perimeter defenders with legitimate skill on the perimeter. If that's what you want to do, and go with a death lineup defensively, hey, I think that would be cool. It might be a little boring. It might not be the most fun team to watch, but I think you'd win a lot of games if you built a legitimate defensive core around Rudy Gobert. I think you'd win a lot of games because I don't think many teams are going to score a lot of points. Or you can go offense. You could go either A, offense, or a bit of a mix and match with Donovan Mitchell and keep him. I'm almost to the point where I want both of them gone. I think Donovan has kind of weighed on me. He's digressed, which isn't good. I think he's much more likely to leave on his own than Rudy Gobert is, despite the fact that he claims he's all for Utah and this, Utah, that. At the end of the day, I think he's much more likely to leave. I don't think he is as, set on helping Utah as Gobert is, and I'm not saying he's not in the slightest, but I'm saying I think he has more likelihood of leaving. And at this point, if you're going to get rid of one of them, Donovan Mitchell will probably give you the better return. So if you're going for the one of them gone approach, Donovan Mitchell gone is probably the better return, safer play because he might just leave on his own in the future. But in my eyes, why not get rid of both of them? I love Gobert. I really do like Mitchell too. But if you want to go into a full rebuild, you can't have either of them. Trade them. Get some picks. Get some young players. Restart the timeline. Get some youth. Find some gems in the draft. You do what you have to do. But at the end of the day, remaining mediocre, like how the Jazz have remained mediocre over the last several years, is just not the way to go. Eventually, more and more fans are going to turn against this mediocre franchise, just like I have already, and it's going to be hell for the front office in Utah. I'm hoping we get big move Danny Ainge. He's a notorious big move guy. I'm hoping he makes some because in this offseason is going to be crucial. If we return Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell next year, okay, whatever. But the rest of the team has to go. If we return nobody next year, good. Do what you have to do to get us back on track. Because what we have right now is going to make it the playoffs every year. They're going to make the playoffs every year, this team. But they're never going to win a championship. They'll probably never make a conference finals. And we just have to live with that. If that's the reality you want to accept, accept it. I don't feel like accepting it. I think it's rebuild time in Utah. Small market teams have done it in the past. Look at Milwaukee. Find a gem in the draft. Try to get lucky. Sometimes that's what it takes. But right now, Utah, I believe it's the end of an era. I believe the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert experiment is over. The Mike Conley experiment is over. And if the team wants to move forward, they'll see to it that those things are true. Thanks for watching. That's the end of the video. Had to get that little rant out. I'm not super excited about next year because we'll either be in a rebuild state or we'll have the same crappy team. But I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that the front office will reset the timeline, start a rebuild, and 3 or 4 years down the road, we'll be looking at a team that we're very proud of. That we don't have that feeling right now. So make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Podcasts, the 3-1 podcast comes out on Monday, noon Central every week. If you want to tune into that, that's all sports. If it's just me, it's mostly basketball. But if it's other guys there, it's all sports. And as for 3-1 Sports, you can find us on every single social media at 3-1 Sports, and you can find the 3-1 podcast on here, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.